an unsurpassed, penetrating and perfect Dharma is rarely met with, even in 100,000 million kalpas. Having it to see and listen to remember and accept, I vow to taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
So last week we were talking about a particular subject, and I think we'll continue on that tonight. I think it's relevant. So the question came up. We started with the question of, does Zazen change the cellular aspect of the body? Does it literally change us in a way that instructs our life and is useful in the world? You can turn yourself so you aren't straining your neck and face in this direction, otherwise your neck gets really tired. That's much better. So how are we changed then cellularly? How does the body change and the connection of the body-mind change by the right of this practice of Zazen? I think we engaged in that kind of conversation and what that connection is in the world. And maybe we got a little bit into, if our body is changed and if it's having an effect on the world, is this enough? I don't know whether we got there, whether to sit Zazen is enough in the world, or are we also required to go out and act in the world in some way? And it occurred to me today when I was reading the news about the coronavirus that it's easy to see how interconnected we are when something like a virus transmits through peoples and across the world. I don't know how many countries now. A lot of countries are experiencing the coronavirus, our United States among them. And so this tiny virus, can jump out and affect and infect somebody else. If we even think in that way, but of course what we do, all of the cells in the body seem to leap out and seem to join in the world in some way, it seems to me. And maybe they're not all cells of infection that would doom us in some way, but they are connections, actual electrical connections that affects the world that we are in, touches one another, and affects the people with whom we confer and move with. So it behooves us then to develop ourselves in such a way that we nurture that which is best in us and best in the world. Seems to me, I can't imagine why we wouldn't want to do that. Not always easy, and it's a challenge, certainly, but to want to make a better world seems to me a natural instinct of the human being. Even though, as we chanted in the Heart Sutra tonight, there is ignorance, but also no extinction, no ignorance, but also no extinction of it. So while we practice in the world of samsara, we are always touched by ignorance, our own ignorance and the ignorance of others. And very difficult to understand is that ignorance and delusion are the soup of awakening. And we don't kind of have one without the other. So it's an important thing. And so one person who asked a question last week, and I agreed to continue this conversation, is not here tonight. So I don't know what his question would have been, but maybe you have some more further thoughts on it, Will, since Will was participant in last week's conversation, or a supporter. We had a dialogue together, and others joined in the dialogue. But it just seems to me that we have this very apparent exchange before us, this exchange of cells that is known as the coronavirus. And if that can do that, then our goodness can also do that. The Buddha essentially studied energy, and the body is pure energy. And I wonder sometimes if we could see the human being from another dimension, we just might not see ourselves as we do, but we might see these shimmering bodies of electrical impulse. We might see them in that way rather than in the the solid nature, the appearance of the solid nature of the body, which is actually not solid at all. It is really that shimmering pack of vibration that is happening. And it vibrates in the frequency of that looks like you and you and you and you and you and you and you. So, and I'm not a scientist, but that's so. And we are insubstantial. So how we conduct ourselves, what spiritual choice we make, has a huge effect on the world around us. I was thinking also about Dogen Zenji. When Dogen Zenji set out on his trip to China to find his teacher, Japan was cellularly changed by Dogen Zenji's action. That one great teacher's action, all of Japan was changed by that. Dogen was in 1200, and it's in the years between 1200, 1250, when Dogen was alive, and up to now, all of the arts, without fail, are out of the Zen tradition. And Japan was changed by the development of that art. The entire culture was changed by it. So it's a profound practice that we don't feel quite in this country because we don't have 15,000 Soto Zen temples. We are a larger country. Japan is the size, almost the same size as the state of Montana. And so it's a smaller country that can, and an island country that can certainly feel an impact of something very profound. And it's a little bit more difficult in this country where we are so spread out. We are separated by mountain ranges. We are culturally separated by mountain ranges and areas. And so we don't feel that same impact, I think, even given the internet. Maybe actually the internet is destroying the impact of the more subtle cultural aspects that are coming into the culture. So, but Dogen Zenji changed the nature of Japan. Artistically, was completely changed. Every single art that you can think of is influenced by Zen and developed by Zen practice in Japan. It's most interesting to me. So,
I think the question that comes up for me in this, it's like there have been moments in my life where I see people do extraordinary things. And I think one such moment was watching Tokunaga Sensei performing calligraphy. And it was like being so surprised. Like there was something intrinsically surprising about it, in which it just so far exceeded my expectation. And when I try to describe that, it's like the closest I can think to say it. It's like, it was like watching like a lion in the wild, just behaving as if there was nothing standing in its way.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was nothing standing in its way, because it's at the top of the food chain. And I feel like there are moments where I feel in my life like I am so connected with what's going on. And I haven't quite figured out how to do it all the time, but I wonder if, like, from the outside, it's like, are those moments sort of like when you're just fully on, like in your body? But I think, like, when I watch, as I understand lions, it's like, I mean, they're not always hunting. I think they do relax and they do play and they do show affection.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they have all of these dynamics. But when I think about awakening, it's just like those moments when you're just fully on.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if that
Mm-hmm.
is one alternate way of describing it.
Of describing the body and
Well,
mind, or our effect on the world, or describing.
I guess it's not like a causal explanation,
Mm-hmm.
but I guess then you could think of it causally, I suppose. It's, I think that's one of the weird things about being a human being. It's like we sort of can and cannot be apex. It's like a weird thing we don't talk about that often, but I mean, we were primates. We were gatherers.
And hunters.
Well, I think that the hunting sort of crept up, and it's sort of, I think, one way of thinking about a human being.
I think the hunting started before the gathering.
That could be.
Yes.
But it's sort of that it's like we found a way of, it's like we cheated the system a little bit when we made tools to the degree that we did,
Mm-hmm.
which seems unprecedented.
Mm-hmm.
It's like then you can it's like you can compensate for physical weakness by hunting in groups. So I guess I'm not trying to describe this as like the dietary limits of like how humans evolved, but more of like, as we incorporated technology, like we had this conscious leap, sort of. And it's like one way of thinking about why people have so much anxiety. It's like our evolution hasn't really caught up to how much power we can wield through our tools. And so then it sort of becomes this idea, like maybe some of us are better at overcoming our anxiety than others.
So, are you suggesting that we don't have an effect on the world in our zazen? I mean, that's the subject that we're talking about.
I guess one way of framing it, like maybe that's the change that meditation makes at the cellular level. It's that the experience of anxiety is removed.
Okay. Let me set the stage for that experience that Will had that he's talking about with Tokunaga Sensei. So we were at Evergreen College, and we were one of the big meeting rooms. And so there were about 60 or 80 people in attendance, all sitting in chairs all the way around the room. And Tokunaga Sensei, who's about 4'11", little teeny tiny woman, is painting on a surface about the size of this mat in the center of the room. And so in order to paint it, she had to stand on the paper with a brush that was about this size, a big paintbrush. The bristles about this long and about this fat around. And so she would pick up the brush and stand on the paper for a long time, centering herself and waiting for the moment when she was just going to put the brush down on the paper. And when you do shodo, brush painting, calligraphy, you can't brush over it. You put the pen down, you put the brush down, and it just begins to move in the expression that the ink and the brush are taking with the painter at the same time. They all become one, and the brush finds its own way and makes its own accidentals on the paper. And so it's a very profound thing to watch, to see. And at that time, Will was just brand new to Zazen practice here at Olympia Zen Center, and I don't think you'd ever seen anybody do something like that before. And of course, the room was silent. Everybody sitting, just waiting for this moment in which she brushes. And everybody fell away entirely, and the lion, as you say, became the full expression of the room before everyone. And so it is a stunning thing to see that expression take place. It is a true Zen experience. This is done. This happens. Nothing else happens. Just that. And so we have these moments of witnessing this, and we're filled with the awe of the mastery of that. It's a very stunning experience. And so it's very rare to see also, and yet you can sense that there is a change that took place in you, of course, at that moment. As you say, you saw that and you witnessed that, experienced that. And we're changed by those moments. We feel the cellular nature in our body that something happened. We witnessed something happened important, and we can't deny it.
And I'm trying to, but it's like those moments, like the only thing stopping people from being like that is themselves.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
I mean, you could just take it.
Sure.
Because there's nothing prohibiting you.
Yeah.
But it's like our own fear of our own power is, I think.
Sure. And Tokunaga Sensei gave the 10,000 hours to become a master calligrapher, of course. She was painting from the time she was 22, and now she's 70. So that counts for a lot too. That was her practice. She focused on that, and she said, that's what I'm doing with my life. And the intention of a calligraphy, as with here, this calligraphy, we can't read it, although we can read the paint. But we can't necessarily read the Japanese, but neither can the Japanese read this, because it's cursive writing. And so they are, few Japanese people say, I don't know, I think it's, they'll discuss what it might mean. But it doesn't have to mean it presents itself before us. And so we appreciate the ink and the energy of this painting. Well, this was my teacher, Nihoroshi, painted this, not Tokunaga Sensei. But she gave her life to that expression to put before us so that we would be awakened in the looking at the calligraphy. I mean, Dogen Zenji, in his own poetry and in his own calligraphy, he said, if you read that, the idea is that as an expression, when you see that, you are awakened by that awakening. Dogen Zenji's awakening fell onto the paper, and then our awakening is there for us in that reading. We are awakened by his awakening. So that's the intention, and she gave her whole life to that. So that's why you could say a lion was standing in the center of the room.
And I guess I think then the question becomes, I think it was almost, it's like those moments, for lack of a better word, have a certain magic to them. Mm-hmm. It's just like that which is so, like, beyond your ability to describe it.
Sure, exactly.
But, like, I don't know if we all, like, everyone in that room, I don't think had the same degree of appreciation for it.
Maybe not.
Because it's sort of like art is, I think, a two-way participation in which you, the viewer, are to some degree responsible for understanding how to, like, receive mm-hmm. that which the other person is trying to communicate.
Yes, right.
So I think it's like, even, it's like to learn to appreciate it, I think itself takes time.
It indeed does. It absolutely does. And an agreement that I will be present to what is coming before me so that I can listen and see and taste and touch what the gift of that piece of art is. It certainly takes practice, and it takes, a certain luck of the draw of the cards to be able to come into a place where that is apparent and available, and that we can be touched by that. And if we are touched by that, then it is our responsibility to nurture it. And as we nurture it, we are cellularly changed, and we change the world in which we are in. You'd agree to that?
Yeah, I think in every moment, I think, put most simply, whatever it is we think about becomes stronger. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's that idea that we're always training something.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like whatever, I think, meaningful choice we have as human beings, it's sort of, I think, kind of like choosing what you want that to be. Mm-hmm. And not going with the default things, which end up being
sure,
like your greed or your ignorance.
Yes. Right. So we make a choice. Always choices. Always choices. Anybody? Yeah, Larry.
On the topic of connectivity, probably a couple of weeks ago I read an article by an epidemiologist with the World Health Organization, WHO. And the subject of his article was how to minimize your risk to being infected with this virus. And his advice, I'm sure all of you have heard, is wash your hands, wash them a lot, and try and keep your hands off of your face. And that led to the topic of masks. And it's his belief that the masks are perhaps that the best benefit of wearing these masks is that it sort of inhibits you from touching your face. As far as stopping a virus, not so much. But then he also observed, at least in Asia, these masks serve as a certain symbol in terms of awareness, making the people aware that we are all in this together. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of a symbol of solidarity. Mm-hmm. And I had this thought, not in any way to look for a silver lining in this terrible virus, but just an awareness that it might enable a very large number of people to realize that indeed we are connected in ways that we don't even know, yes. And individual behavior counts.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Yeah. It does. And we're quite severely tested these days, I think, in terms of our public discourse and how we are together. It's a most difficult time, but it also is a very great opportunity for all of us to show a little kindness where we can. It changes people. It's amazing if you go to the supermarket and you know somebody drops something and you pick it up for them. They're just changed by that. You know?
Kindness can be infectious.
Yes, it is. It truly is. So these very simple things that are not so simple. I mean, everything is so turned around that we are astonished by kindness. And that's not correct. We should be astonished by meanness. Right? That's how it ought to be. Now we see stories of people who do some little thing and they're made heroes in their town because they do something. They get a cat out of a tree or something, you know. And that should just be a regular thing that we do. The astonishment should become that we are astonished at that which is disruptive and ruinous to the culture. So, but yeah.
Well, I think to me, it's like we sort of waded into the very practical side of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, it's like when you ask yourself the question, like, what is enough? At what point, like, will you feel content?
Mm-hmm.
And sort of like, what then is that? And I think it still kind of comes down to this idea of that, like, whatever we think about grows stronger. And so then I think when you then meet the thing that feels like that connection, the practice then sort of becomes like just remembering to think about it.
Yes.
Which is, I think, like the mask idea. It's like, at a practical level, I mean, just like, it's like picking up something at the grocery store. Like, on some level, yes, it's a kind deed, but I think it's like, it's just a reminder of that thing that's more important.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And therefore it grows stronger because you think about it
Yes.
again.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's like, how much are you willing to be disciplined enough to like set your environment up in such a way that you remember what you want to manifest in the world
Right.
more often.
Right. And I want to say, when you ask, well, what is enough? I want to ask, you know, we ask personally, what is enough suffering? Have I taken on enough suffering such that I want to see it through and ask, why am I suffering in this life in such a way that is not beneficial to me or to the world? And in that turning moment, then we are moved into a place where we can let go of that, not to dismiss suffering in the world, but to transform our own personal suffering that we ourselves have generated and become wider in the world because of that, and more useful in the world because of that. So
I think that is a different way of describing something that I've come to recently. Because it's sort of like yeah, on some level it's like finding the right idea to manifest.
mm,
But it's a little bit more complicated, because I think as human beings, it's like we have different ways of thinking too. And so it's like, not only is it kind of like thinking about a certain thing, but thinking about that certain thing in a certain way.
mm-hmm.
And I think if I really look at my own life, it's like sometimes I am operating in like this way that's sort of like, I don't feel like I have what I need, therefore I'm looking for something that isn't there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that that's ever really useful.
Yeah, it's not.
It's like, it's just way more effective for me to find like the thing that is, it's like the best thing around me,
Mm-hmm.
and to cultivate it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like whether you're focusing on the absence or the connection.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's I think like for me personally, I experience those like throughout the day, and they're very different from one another.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the experience then of absence of something it's just the opposite side of one's true home. So that if we think that we are missing something, it's a misunderstanding, because we lack absolutely nothing. We lack nothing. Our true home is the Buddha Dharma, the Buddha self. So when we feel we are lacking something, it's simply the opposite side of being home, and knowing that we actually never leave home. We are always at home. No matter where you are at home. You can't not be at home. There's always the manifestation of home. Always. So
I feel like this is one way of describing, I think, like what it is to just fall in love with where you are
mm-hmm.
in the moment.
Yes. Yes.
It's like just learning to appreciate its beauty and just to accept it
Yes.
in some intrinsic way, to
Yeah.
just trust.
Yeah.
Is that,
Yeah.
it's like exactly how I experience it.
Mhm. Okay. That's good nurturing practice. Yeah. So anyway, I think that we will all we will see many changes, I think, in our living situation in the coming months, as if the predictions by the epidemiologists are correct, then we are going to see a disruption to our lives. I know my family live in Switzerland, and already the schools are getting ready to close there, and the students will be doing their daily exercises on Skype so that they won't go to school. Because Switzerland is in a difficult situation. Zurich has become a lot like Frankfurt. All the planes fly into Zurich, and that's where you do your transfers. So Switzerland is seeing a big uptick in the coronavirus. So we're seeing this shift happening very quickly. And so we will see that kind of disruption here. And so while we manifest the Buddha Dharma, and we manifest the wonderful nature and the cellular divine nature of the changes through Zazen, we also care for whatever it is on this physical level, and we'll probably put out things to wash your hands when you come in the door, and then when you go out again, that kind of stuff we'll do, I think. But so far, the epidemiologists say it's not time for masks. So that's but washing the hands is lots and lots of that, saying hello like this, and so that sort of thing, probably beginning now, would be a good practice to start. So we still, for all that we manifest the Buddha nature, we also take care of this human level. And we can't ignore that also. So we must go out and we must engage in the marketplace in the best way possible. Okay? Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassed, I vow